The courtroom was quiet in the way a room gets quiet when everyone believes the ending has already been decided. A man stood at the defense table in a wrinkled dress shirt that had been worn too many times. His hands were clasped so tightly his knuckles looked pale. His name was Daniel Reyes. Daniel had worked every job that would take him. Warehouse nights, delivery mornings, construction weekends. He never called himself unlucky out loud, but the truth was, he lived inside a calendar of consequences. One mistake from years ago still followed him like a shadow with paperwork. Probation sounded like mercy to people who had never worn it. Daniel knew it was a trap with polite language. He had to check in. He had to pay. He had to keep a job. He had to keep a home. He had to keep a car running. He had to keep his life stable in a world that loved to shake it. Behind him, the benches were full. Not with supporters, with strangers, people who came for an afternoon of judgment the way other people came for a movie. In the front row sat a little girl, with dark hair pulled back into a neat ponytail. Her feet didn't touch the floor when she sat. She held a folded piece of paper in both hands, like it was the last thing keeping her from shaking apart. Her name was Sophia. She was 8 years old, and she looked too small for the weight on her chest. She had chosen a seat close enough to see her father's face, close enough to see his eyes, because Sophia had learned something early in life. Adults could lie with their mouths, but eyes told the truth. Daniel tried not to look at her too long. If he looked too long, he would break, and Daniel believed a father had to stay solid, even when the world was trying to crush him into dust. Sophia's mother was gone. 2 years. 2 years of Daniel learning how to pack lunches, braid hair, and pretend grief was not a daily weather system. 2 years of Sophia learning how to swallow tears in public so adults wouldn't ask questions she couldn't answer. But Sophia's mother had left something behind. Not money, not a house, not a safety net. She had left Sophia a habit. Save what you see, she had whispered one night, when Sophia was still small enough to fall asleep mid-sentence. If something feels wrong, don't argue with it. Write it down. Take a picture. Keep it somewhere safe, because grown-ups forget on purpose. Sophia didn't fully understand then. She understood now. Inside Sophia's jacket pocket was an old paper envelope with a photo folded inside. The envelope was worn at the edges from being opened and closed so many times. Sophia had touched it the way other kids touched a Lucky Charm. The judge didn't know that. The judge didn't care. At the bench, Judge Howard Kessler adjusted his robe with the lazy confidence of a man who had decided 1,000 lives with the same calm expression. Silver hair, a steady stare, a voice that carried authority like it was oxygen. He didn't look at Daniel like a human being. He looked at him like a file. The prosecutor stood, polished and clean, speaking as if the words were already carved into stone. The defense attorney tried to sound steady, but his voice had the exhausted edge of someone who knew the system was hungry today. Daniel's case was simple on paper. A violation of probation, a missed check-in, a late payment, a technical failure that the court treated like a moral one. To the law, Daniel was a repeat offender. To the courtroom, he was a problem. To Sophia, he was her father. Sophia remembered the night Daniel explained probation to her. He tried to make it sound simple, like a school rule. He said, "If I do everything right, they leave me alone. If I do one thing wrong, they act like I did everything wrong." Sophia had asked, "Why?" Daniel didn't answer. Because there wasn't a child-safe explanation for a system that loved traps. Judge Kessler looked down at the file. His eyes moved across lines of text like he was reading weather. Then he placed the file down and folded his hands. "Mr. Reyes," he said, voice smooth, controlled, "this court has given you opportunities. You have failed to comply with the terms set forth. Therefore, this court orders." Sophia's heart slammed against her ribs so hard it felt like pain. She knew what those words meant. She had heard them in movies. She had heard them whispered by adults who thought she wasn't listening. Therefore, this court orders. It meant goodbye. Sophia's fingers tightened around the folded paper. Her face turned hot. Her vision blurred. She could hear her own breathing, small and uneven. Daniel stared straight ahead. His shoulders were stiff, but his eyes were wet. He was trying to hold himself together because he didn't want his daughter to see him break. Judge Kessler lifted his gaze. 30 days in county custody, he said. Maybe you'll finally learn what responsibility means. A sound escaped Sophia's throat. Not a word. A small, broken noise. The judge's eyes flicked toward her, annoyed. A child was a distraction. A child was inconvenient. The bailiff shifted his stance. Daniel's attorney opened his mouth, but nothing came out, because in that moment, the ending had already been pronounced. Sophia stood up. The wood of the bench creaked loud enough to turn heads. Every face in the courtroom turned toward her, like she was stepping into the path of traffic. Sophia's legs trembled. Her hands shook so badly the paper fluttered, and she said, in a voice that barely carried at first, "Please don't lock up my dad." Judge Kessler stared at her like she was breaking a rule. Sophia swallowed hard and tried again, louder. "Please don't lock up my dad, because I know what you did." The room froze. Even the air seemed to stop moving. The judge's expression didn't change right away, but something happened behind his eyes. A flicker, a tightening, a fraction of a second where his confidence slipped. The prosecutor blinked, confused. The defense attorney turned his head slowly, like he wasn't sure what he'd heard. Daniel's eyes snapped to Sophia, his face drained of color. Sophia's voice shook. "I know what you did," she repeated, "and I can prove it." The courtroom didn't breathe. A room full of adults suddenly felt like children, watching a child hold a knife made of truth. Judge Kessler's voice stayed smooth, but it sounded different now. "Young lady," he said, "sit down." Sophia did not sit. The bailiff took one step forward. The judge lifted a hand to stop him, but his hand moved too quickly, too sharp, too nervous. Sophia's small chest rose and fell fast. She looked at her father. Then she looked back at the judge. "You told my dad he had no choices," Sophia said. "But you had choices. You did something, and you thought nobody would ever know." Judge Kessler's jaw tightened. "This is not appropriate," he said. "Counsel, control your client's family." The defense attorney looked like his brain was scrambling. "Your Honor," he began. The prosecutor stepped forward, annoyed. "Your Honor, this is an emotional outburst. The child should be removed." Sophia shook her head violently. "No, don't remove me. Because if you remove me, you can pretend it's not real." The judge's eyes flashed. "Bailiff." Sophia raised the paper in her hand. "Wait," she said. "Just wait. You don't get to silence me. Not after what you did." Daniel's voice came out hoarse. "Sophia, stop." His eyes were pleading. "Please." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "I have to, Daddy," she whispered, "because if I don't, you go away, and he gets to keep doing it." The judge leaned forward slightly. His voice turned colder. "Young lady, you are in a court of law." Sophia nodded, tears running now. "I know," she said. "That's why I'm saying it here, because this is the only place you can't hide." A murmur moved through the benches. Whispers began to rise like wind before a storm. Judge Kessler's gaze snapped to the bailiff again. "Remove the child." The bailiff stepped forward, and that was the moment Evan Mercer walked into the courtroom. He didn't burst in. He didn't shout. He simply appeared at the side door, scanning the room like he was counting exits. Evan wasn't here by accident. He had been following a thread since the hospital. A thread about systems that moved fast, blamed faster, and used silence like glue. He had received a message 2 days earlier from an unknown number. "You're not safe." Then a second message. "Courtroom, Thursday, 9 a.m. Bring your eyes." Evan had shown up because he had learned something. When people in power felt threatened, they didn't stop. They shifted locations. Evan's gaze landed on Sophia, standing with paper in her hand. On Daniel, pale at the table. On the judge, too rigid, too sharp. Evan felt the air. He recognized it. The moment right before the system tried to crush the smallest person in the room, Evan stepped forward. "Your Honor," Evan said, voice calm, firm, "I'm requesting the court pause for 1 minute." The judge snapped his head toward Evan, and in that snap, Evan saw it. Recognition, not of his face, but of the threat. "Who are you?" the judge demanded. Evan answered evenly, "A citizen and a witness." The prosecutor scoffed. "Your Honor, who is this?" Evan didn't look at the prosecutor. He looked at the judge. "If you remove that child," Evan said, "you may be obstructing evidence." The word evidence landed like a slap. Judge Kessler's lips pressed together. "This is outrageous," he said. Evan nodded once. "Maybe, but not as outrageous as what she's about to say." Sophia's eyes snapped to Evan. She didn't know him, but she knew what he was doing. He was buying her time. The bailiff stopped, uncertain. Judge Kessler's voice turned dangerous. "Bailiff, remove the man as well." Evan didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. He simply held up his phone. "Before you do that," Evan said, "I want the record to show something. I received an anonymous tip about this hearing. I came because I believed a child might be intimidated into silence. And now, in front of everyone, you are attempting to remove her the moment she says the words, 'I can prove it.'" The judge's nostrils flared slightly. "Control yourself, Mr. Mercer," Evan said. "Evan Mercer." The judge's eyes narrowed. Mercer. Like he was searching memory, like he didn't like what he found. Sophia's voice shook, but she pushed through it. "I can prove it," she said again. "Because you were at my school." The room shifted. People blinked. School. Judge Kessler's face didn't change much, but his hands moved. One finger tapped the edge of the bench once, then stopped. A tiny tell, a tiny crack. Sophia wiped her face with her sleeve. "Last month," she said, "at Oak Ridge Elementary. You were there. You were in the parking lot." Judge Kessler's voice sharpened. "Enough." Sophia flinched, but she kept going. "My dad was there too. He was dropping me off. He saw you, and you saw him, and you got mad." Daniel's attorney tried to speak. "Your Honor," the judge snapped. Silence. The attorney froze. Sophia's voice got smaller, but steadier, because this was the part she had practiced in her head. "That morning at school," Sophia said, "the air smelled like wet leaves. Kids were running. Parents were in a hurry. Teachers were calling names. Everything was normal until it wasn't. A car came in too fast," Sophia said. "It didn't slow down the way cars slow down near kids. It sounded angry. There was a man in the crosswalk," Sophia whispered. "He had a backpack. He was holding a coffee. He looked like he was just trying to get to work. Then the car hit him. A sound like metal and bone, and panic. Coffee flew. The backpack hit the ground. The man went down hard. People screamed. A teacher grabbed Sophia's arm and pulled her toward the doors. Sophia's eyes stayed on the car. Dark sedan. Dented front. The driver's window was tinted, but the car paused for a second. The door cracked open. Not all the way, just enough for someone to look out. Sophia remembered her mother arriving a minute later. Her mother had been late to work that day. Her mother saw the man on the ground, saw the car, saw the hesitation, and then the car rolled forward. Not a full escape at first, a slow, careful roll. Like the driver thought nobody would notice if they moved quietly. Sophia's mother lifted her phone and took a picture, Sophia said. She said, "Don't look away, Sophie. If you look away, they win." The prosecutor's mouth parted. The defense attorney stared at Sophia like she was a witness in a case nobody had filed. The judge's face stayed hard, but his eyes were not calm anymore. Sophia swallowed. Then she finished the part that made the room turn colder. "My dad saw the car too," Sophia said. "He stepped toward it. He was yelling. He wasn't trying to be brave. He was trying to stop it. He told the driver to stay. And that's when the car door opened more. Sophia's hands shook, and Sophia said, "You were sitting in the back seat." The courtroom jolted. The judge's jaw flexed. His eyes flashed in a way that wasn't judge-like at all. It was personal. "I saw your robe bag in the back," Sophia said. "It was black. It had your initials. You had it on your shoulder, and you looked at my dad like you wanted him to disappear." The prosecutor took a step without realizing it. The defense attorney whispered, "Jesus." Judge Kessler's voice cut through like a blade. "That is enough." Sophia flinched, but she kept going, because fear didn't matter when your father was about to vanish. After that, Sophia said, "My dad tried to tell someone. He called. He went to a desk. He was told it was handled. Then he got pulled aside. He got warned. He got told to stop making noise." Daniel's face tightened. He hadn't wanted Sophia to say that, because it was true, and because truth had consequences. Sophia lifted the folded paper again. "You hit someone with your car," Sophia said, "and you drove away." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. "Hit someone?" The judge's face went still, too still. His voice turned almost gentle, which was worse. "Young lady, you are confused." Sophia shook her head. "No," she whispered. "I saw your license plate. I wrote it down." She held up the paper. Judge Kessler's eyes locked on it, and for the first time, fear moved across his face. Just for a moment. Then it vanished behind anger. "That paper is meaningless," the judge snapped. "Bailiff, remove her now." The bailiff moved again. Evan's voice cut through. "Your Honor," Evan said, "if that plate matches your vehicle registration, that becomes relevant evidence. Removing her could be interpreted as witness intimidation." The prosecutor's eyes widened. The defense attorney's mouth fell open. Judge Kessler's voice rose, and the control cracked. "This is my courtroom." Evan nodded. "It is. And that's why everything happening right now is being recorded." Sophia spoke quickly before she was grabbed. "You smiled at my dad," she said. "Like you were happy. He was powerless." Daniel's body tensed. "Sophia, stop," he whispered again. Sophia's voice broke. "Daddy, you always tell me to tell the truth. So, I'm telling the truth." The bailiff reached her shoulder, and Sophia said the sentence that made the judge's face finally crack. "I also have a picture." The room snapped into silence. "A picture?" Sophia's eyes filled. "I didn't want to," she whispered. "But my mom told me to save it. Because grown-ups lie." Daniel's head jerked. Sophia's mother was gone. She had died 2 years earlier. Sophia didn't talk about her much. It hurt too much. But Sophia was saying her mother had prepared her for this. Prepared her for a day like today. Sophia reached into her pocket. Her fingers fumbled. She pulled out something small and rectangular. A printed photo, folded in half. She held it up. The judge's face went rigid, his eyes fixed on the photo like it was a weapon. "Don't," the judge hissed. It was the first time the judge had sounded like a man instead of a judge. A man begging. A man scared. The courtroom heard it. Sophia unfolded the photo. It showed a dark sedan in a school parking lot. A dented front bumper. A blurred figure stepping out. And in the corner, clear as day, a license plate. The same plate Sophia had written on her paper. Judge Kessler's plate. The room exploded. Gasps. Voices. People standing to see. Phones lifting. The bailiff looked at the judge, uncertain. The prosecutor looked at the photo, then at the judge, then back at the photo. The defense attorney spoke fast, almost pleading. "Your Honor, we need to recess." Judge Kessler's voice came out thin. "That image is inadmissible. It's manipulated. Evan stepped forward. "I request the clerk take that photo and preserve it as potential evidence," Evan said. "Right now." Chain of custody. In front of the whole room, the clerk hesitated, eyes flicking to the judge. Judge Kessler's voice sharpened. "Do not take that." And the room heard it. The judge ordering the clerk not to touch evidence. The prosecutor's face drained. "Your Honor, he said quietly. "You need to stop speaking." Judge Kessler slammed the gavel. "Order, order." It didn't work. "Because you couldn't gavel away a license plate." Evan looked at the bailiff. "Step back," Evan said. "Let the clerk do their job." The bailiff hesitated, because now the room was watching the bailiff too. The clerk finally stood, hands shaking, and reached for the photo. Judge Kessler's jaw clenched. "That is not admitted." Evan kept his voice calm. "Nobody said it was admitted," Evan said. "It's preserved. There's a difference, and you know it." Sophia looked at her father, tears streaming. "They were going to take you," she said, "and I couldn't let them. Because he did it, and he gets to wear a robe, and you get handcuffs." Daniel's hands shook. He covered his mouth with his fingers like he was trying not to sob in public. Judge Kessler's eyes moved quickly now, calculating. Exits, options, how to shrink the story back down. He leaned toward the clerk. His voice dropped to a whisper. Evan saw it. The judge trying to control the evidence before it became permanent. Evan raised his voice. "Stop," Evan said. "The record needs to note the judge is communicating off the record while implicated." The judge snapped his head up. "How dare you?" Evan met his eyes. "How dare you?" Evan replied. "You were about to sentence a man while your own secret sat in an 8-year-old's pocket." The prosecutor finally spoke, voice tight. "Your Honor, we need to pause proceedings now, and we need a supervisor judge." The judge stared at him, because the prosecutor had just stepped off the judge's side. Sophia's legs trembled. She swayed slightly. A woman in the back row moved forward and placed a steady hand on Sophia's shoulder. "Lila, calm eyes." A voice that sounded like safety. "You're okay," Lila whispered. "Just breathe." Judge Kessler stared at Lila, irritated. "Remove them," he snapped. The bailiff took a step, and Calvin stood. Calvin's coat hung loose on his frame. He looked like someone the court would normally ignore. But when Calvin stood, the room felt it. "Before you remove anyone," Calvin said calmly, "I want to ask a question. How many people has this judge sentenced while hiding that plate?" The room froze again. Judge Kessler's face tightened. "Sit down," the judge hissed. Calvin didn't sit. "No," Calvin said. "You want people to sit because sitting makes them smaller. Standing makes them human." The prosecutor looked like he was losing control of his own breathing. "Your Honor," he repeated, "we need to recess." Judge Kessler's voice sharpened. Too sharp. "Denied." The courtroom reacted audibly now, a ripple of disbelief. Evan looked at the court reporter. "You're capturing this denial," Evan said. "And the reason?" "Because the presiding judge is implicated." The court reporter's fingers moved faster. Judge Kessler's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. For the first time, he looked like a man trapped in his own authority. He leaned back in his chair and forced his voice to steady. "We will take a brief recess," he said. 5 minutes. The judge hit the gavel once and stood. But as he stood, something else happened. A private exit behind the bench opened slightly. Judge-only access. No cameras in that hallway. A perfect place for a story to vanish. Judge Kessler's eyes flicked toward it. Evan saw it. The judge was thinking of leaving. "Your Honor," Evan said, "if you leave the bench while implicated, that will be noted. Do not destroy evidence. Do not contact anyone." Judge Kessler's eyes burned. "You are not the court," Evan answered calmly. "No. But I know how systems protect themselves, and I know what you're about to try." The judge's jaw clenched. He turned sharply and walked toward the private door. The bailiff moved with him. The prosecutor looked panicked. "Someone stop him." The defense attorney spoke fast. "Your Honor, you cannot." The judge disappeared through the private door. The room erupted. People stood. Phones lifted. Whispers turned into loud voices. Sophia shook. Her face went pale. "Is he going to run?" she whispered. Leela knelt beside her. No, Leela whispered. Not if we do this right. Evan turned to the prosecutor. Call law enforcement. Now, not court security. Real law enforcement. The prosecutor looked torn. Then he nodded and pulled out his phone. Calvin leaned close to Evan. He's done this before, Calvin said quietly. Evan nodded. This wasn't the first time the judge had tried to walk away. It was just the first time an 8-year-old held the key. 5 minutes passed, like a storm cloud. The private door stayed closed. Then 2 officers entered the courtroom. Not bailiffs, county officers. Behind them walked a court administrator, pale and sweating. Everyone, the administrator said, please remain seated. Nobody sat. The officers walked straight toward the bench. The prosecutor stepped forward. The presiding judge is now implicated in a potential hit and run, he said. Evidence has been presented in open court. The judge attempted to block preservation. The officers nodded once, like they already knew. They moved through the private door behind the bench. Seconds later, voices rose from the hallway, muffled, tense, then louder. Then a sharp command. The door opened again. Judge Kessler stepped out with an expression of controlled outrage. His robe looked the same. His face did not. He looked smaller. One officer stood at his side, hand near cuffs, not touching yet, because the system still hesitated to touch a robe. The court administrator spoke quickly, voice shaking. Judge Kessler, you are relieved of duties pending investigation. The judge's lips pressed together. This is unprecedented, he snapped. The officer replied flatly. So is an 8-year-old bringing your license plate into your courtroom? The room gasped. Again. Sophia's knees almost buckled. Leela held her. Daniel stared at the judge, like he couldn't believe it, like the world had been flipped upside down. The defense attorney spoke quickly. We request immediate release pending reassignment. This sentence was pronounced under compromised authority. The prosecutor nodded stiffly. Agreed. The court administrator swallowed. Mr. Reyes, he said, you are released pending reassignment of this case. Daniel's breath hitched. He didn't move at first. His body had been braced for handcuffs. Now, it didn't know how to be free. Sophia whispered, Daddy. Daniel turned. He stepped away from the table, slow at first, then faster. Then he dropped to his knees in front of Sophia and pulled her into his arms. His shoulders shook. He tried to speak, but couldn't. Sophia sobbed into his shirt. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry Daniel shook his head. No, baby. You saved me. Judge Kessler watched them. And something ugly moved across his face. Not guilt, resentment. He looked at Sophia like she had stolen something from him. Not a secret. A story where he always won. He opened his mouth as if to speak. The officer at his side said quietly, Don't. Judge Kessler's jaw clenched. He stared at Evan, because now he knew Evan had come on purpose. Evan met his eyes. Systems like you win when people stay small, Evan said calmly. Today, an 8-year-old stood up. The judge's face tightened. This will not end the way you think, he said in a low voice. Evan didn't flinch. It already ended the way you didn't expect, Evan replied, because you thought children were powerless. The officer guided the judge toward the side door. Not in cuffs yet, but no longer untouchable. As they passed, Sophia looked up from her father's shoulder. Her eyes were red. Her voice was small but steady. Tell them about the man you hit, she said. The judge froze for half a second, then kept walking. The room buzzed with voices now. Shock, anger, a strange kind of relief. Outside, in the courthouse hallway, reporters appeared. Not because the court called them, because phones had. A camera light flashed. A microphone rose. Daniel flinched. Sophia clutched his hand tighter. Lila stepped in front of them instinctively, shielding Sophia from the glare. Calvin stood to the side, watching exits. Evan looked at the crowd like a man who finally understood the shape of the trap. Daniel's attorney leaned in, urgent. "We move now," he said. "We file emergency motions. We ask for protective orders. We keep the child away from anyone connected to that judge." Daniel nodded, still shaking. They moved through the courthouse lobby. Phones followed. Cameras flashed. Outside, Daniel loaded Sophia into an old sedan. He looked at Evan through the open window. "Thank you," he said. But there was fear in his voice. "Power doesn't forgive," Daniel whispered. "Power remembers." Evan nodded. "Stay close to your lawyer," Evan said. "Back up that photo in multiple places. Do not trust one device. Do not trust one person." Daniel nodded quickly. He started the car. Sophia leaned forward from the back seat. She held up the paper with the license plate one last time, like she was reminding herself it was real. Evan watched the car pull away. Leela exhaled shakily. "An 8-year-old just cracked a judge," she whispered. Calvin's voice stayed calm. "She didn't crack him," Calvin said. "She cracked the wall. Now we find out how big the wall is." Evan pulled his phone out and opened a notes app. He typed, quickly, names, times, what the judge said, what the clerk did, what the bailiff attempted, because memory was fragile, and systems knew how to exploit fragile things. Lila watched him. "You think they'll come after them?" she asked. Evan didn't pretend. "Yes," Evan said. "Not with uniforms first. With paperwork. With rumors. With the kind of quiet pressure that makes people doubt themselves." Calvin nodded once. "They'll try to make the child look unstable," Calvin said. "They'll try to make the photo disappear. They'll try to make the story sound messy enough that nobody repeats it." Evan's phone buzzed. Unknown number. A message. "You stopped the wrong judge." Evan stared at the screen. Calvin leaned close and read it over Evan's shoulder. "That's not a threat," Calvin said. "That's a warning." Lila looked at Evan. "What does it mean?" she whispered. Evan's voice stayed calm, but his chest felt cold. "It means there's more than one. It means the system isn't one man in a robe. It's a network." Evan's phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a message. It was a call. Unknown number. Evan stared at it, then answered. A woman's voice came through, low and controlled. "Mr. Mercer," she said. "You're making a lot of noise." Evan's jaw tightened. "Who is this?" The woman paused, like she was smiling. "Someone who can tell you what really happened at Oak Ridge Elementary, and someone who can tell you what happens next if you keep digging." Evan's stomach turned cold. "Say it," Evan said. The woman's voice stayed smooth. "Meet me tonight. If you want to understand why that judge thought he could walk away." Evan held his breath. The woman added one sentence that made his blood run colder than the hospital ever had. "Because he wasn't the one driving." The line went dead. Evan's screen showed a dropped location a second later. Not a name, not a contact, just a pin on a map and a time. 10:30. A diner off the interstate, the kind with flickering lights and too many windows. Lila read it and felt her throat tighten. "That's a setup," she whispered. Calvin didn't argue. He simply looked at Evan. "If she wants control," Calvin said, "she'll try to separate you from witnesses. She'll try to pull you into a space where your voice becomes your only proof." Evan nodded. "Then we bring our own proof," Evan said. "We document. We remember. We keep everything in more than one place." Lila's eyes searched Evan's face. "And Sophia," she said, "what if they go after the child?" Evan's voice went low. "Then we move faster than they do," he said. "We put the truth everywhere, so nobody can bury it in one office, one hallway, one courtroom." Evan stared at his phone. Lila's eyes widened. "What did she say?" Calvin's face went hard. "She said the judge wasn't driving," Calvin said, "which means the story is deeper, and the person who was driving is still out there." Evan looked back at the courthouse doors. Not fear, pressure. Because the moment you pull on one thread, you find out how many hands are holding the rope. Tonight, Evan said, we meet her. Leela swallowed. Are we going? Evan nodded. Yes, because if we stop now, they learn the lesson that always saves them. That if they scare you hard enough, you go quiet. Calvin looked at Evan. And if we go, Calvin said, we don't go alone. Evan nodded. We don't go alone. And as they walked away, Evan realized something else. Sophia had saved her father today, but she had also started a war she didn't even know existed, and someone was already trying to choose the next scapegoat. Not a janitor, not a father, a child.